A common question in the AQA Economics paper 2 is how to improve a trade deficit. And within this video, we're going to look at why supply-side policies might be one of the best ways of doing so. Obviously, with supply-side policy, there is a time lag that's involved, and that's an obvious disadvantage you can give. But within this video, I'm going to explore why it's necessary, even with the time lag, to really explore supply-side policies, and possibly it might be the only solution for sustainable improvements to the trade deficit. So as the headline says, the hollowing out of the British industry since the 1980s is the single biggest challenge to the UK economy in the post-war era. Now we have to remember that within the UK we've obviously prioritised a tertiary sector. We've looked at mostly the service sector as well in terms of boosting our international trade. I suppose since Thatcher we've deindustrialised, we've kind of neglected manufacturing, and that is going to have an impact on the economy, and it's going to impact on how we obviously progress with manufacturing in the future. And because of that, it could be argued that we haven't got the industry, we haven't got the sector in place to cater for higher demands in, for example, exports. So even if we thought about short-term policies, even if we thought of ways to try and make UK exports as competitive as possible, maybe it's to do with exchange rate manipulation, maybe it's to do with protectionist measures, even if we did all that, it still might not be the case where actually the UK economy is ready to facilitate for the demand of our exports, because we haven't got the infrastructure for it. We haven't got the sector for it. So that is one of the reasons why supply-side policies are absolutely essential, because it's correcting, I suppose, the gaps in infrastructure, the gaps in skill level, and just the gaps that was caused by the deindustrialisation. So following on from that point, this was an article in The Guardian, and it said, why doesn't Britain make things anymore? And in the past 30 years, the UK manufacturing sector has shrunk by 2/3, the greatest deindustrialisation of any major nation. It was done in the name of economic modernisation, but what has replaced it? So what this article looked at is why we, I suppose, turned our back on manufacturing. Now, some people do blame Margaret Thatcher, and I'm sure she did have a massive influence, but some others say it was because we couldn't compete with the likes of China. We couldn't compete with the cheap goods that were being produced and, I suppose, flooding international markets. So for us to improve, I suppose, this gap, as I said before, and to kind of avoid this shrinking manufacturing sector and to help it to grow again, we need to carry out certain policies, and a lot of these policies are supply-side policies in doing so. So one factor is to do with training and education. So one of the factors with regards to manufacturing, because it hasn't been a priority of ours and services have, maybe we've neglected educating people in the manufacturing industry, and therefore currently the manufacturing industry has actually got a skills shortage, and it's lacking the skill levels needed to make it as productive as possible to internationally compete. So the UK government, they are looking at tackling this. They're offering apprenticeship schemes, and they're hoping the apprenticeship schemes can fill in those gaps. Because at the moment, when we're trying to obviously improve the manufacturing industry, we're actually seeing quite an ageing workforce because of that time period that we're missing in manufacturing. So a few more articles to back this up. The struggle to recruit skilled workers is a recurring concern within the UK manufacturing industry, with an EEF report earlier this year revealing that 3/4 of manufacturers have struggled to recruit skilled workers in the last 3 years. So unless we train, unless we educate, we're not going to obviously improve the productivity of the manufacturing sector, and therefore we're not going to be internationally competitive. And as it says here, most UK manufacturers are struggling to recruit skilled workers. Business group EEF says skills shortages is putting productivity growth at risk and warns government over lack of support, and therefore the government have to maybe implement more policies to help with education, to help with training, maybe bring in more vocational courses at school, maybe to continue to increase the apprenticeship places to try and I suppose reduce this skill gap. However, there has been some signs of improvement recently, and maybe it is because of the apprenticeship schemes that are starting to be put in place. Maybe it is because the UK government is starting to realise that we need to start bringing manufacturing back. And as it says here, Britain is now the 8th largest manufacturer in the world by output. So it's at its highest point. And this article here, in terms of UK manufacturing output at its highest for 10 years, is a recent article. It's from this year. So it shows that there has been some growth. Now, to show you why there's been growth in manufacturing, I'm just going to play you a quick video.
Cotton spinning was once a key industry in the northwest of England, and now it has made a return to the UK. A mill in Manchester has become the only textile factory to spin cotton commercially again. The process has revived the sector, connecting businesses across the region as they make clothes using the yarn. Our correspondent Judith Moritz has followed the supply chain from start to finish. Her report contains some flashing images.
Fresh off the boat from California, cotton has come back to its spiritual home. Refurbished and re-energised, this Manchester mill is the first in the UK to spin commercially again. For the first time in 50 years, cotton is in full production.
It's really re-engaged the weavers and the finishers and the dyers to pull together and forge those chains back again. And there is honestly an enormous appetite for provenance and British made.
We're following the process as the cotton spun here finds its way from the bale to the clothes hanger. From its raw state to spun yarn, I'm now going to take this cotton from here in Manchester over to Blackburn to be dyed. That's for you. What happens now?
So we're going to take this into our dye house, we're going to load it onto a dye stand, we're going to bleach it, we're going to dye it, and we're going to dry it.
This yarn dyer's used to source all its cotton overseas. Now it only travels 30 miles. Turned pink, it's time to take the yarn up the road to Burnley to be woven. The resurrection of the cotton process comes at a good time for the industry. BBC News and the trade body Make It British spoke to almost 100 textile businesses to see how their 2017 has been. 30% of them say they're exporting more British-made goods than last year. There is concern about the age of the workforce. 2/3 have staff whose average age is over 40. But overall, the news is positive. 50% of them are turning over more than a year ago. The factory weaving our pink cloth is a good example.
Our order book is really healthy, so the next 6 months forecast is looking great. So much so that we're now having to put on extra shifts and recruit additional staff.
You are then? Back in Manchester, our cloth is now ready to be made into a shirt. Cut, pressed, stitched and finished at this factory, one of the few of its kind to survive.
I don't think we'll ever see a return to the halcyon days of Cottonopolis. However, there is huge opportunities for businesses and brands like ours to create sustainable, viable and ultimately very profitable businesses by making him here again in the UK and selling to an international marketplace.
Spun, dyed, woven and stitched, the cotton process has been sewn back together again. Our journey behind the seams ends with a shirt made from local yarn. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
So this is brilliant, obviously, for the UK, and it's showing that the manufacturing industry and certain industries they're definitely making a comeback. And with cotton especially, I think the UK is seeing a demand for premium, high quality cotton products. I think there's been a shift in maybe in trends, and people are willing to pay a little bit more for higher quality, and that's where obviously the demand is coming from. But from that video, we can see all the technology that was on show in every single stage of that supply chain. And therefore, we really need to try and attract investment from these firms, because I suppose the advanced technology there is really helping to boost the productivity of the cotton industry. Now, how to do that? Well, there's different ways. The government can obviously have an influence. The government's move can provide subsidies to certain companies, like we saw in these videos, to try and incentivise them to invest, to try and help them in terms of buying these types of capital goods. And I suppose when we see this technology and we see what I said before about the training and the improvement in education for manufacturing, then we get to start to see the boost in productivity, and we start to see the international competitiveness. So as it says here, manufacturing contributes £6.7 trillion to the global economy. So contrary to widespread perceptions, I think this video kind of also shows this and demonstrates this. UK manufacturing is thriving, or it's starting to thrive at least, with the UK currently the world's 8th largest industrial nation. If current growth trends continue, the UK will break into the top 5 by 2021. So in the UK, manufacturing makes up to 11%, 44% of total UK exports, 70% of business R&D, and directly employs 2.6 million people. So if we can start to grow this manufacturing sector again, alongside obviously our very, very good services sector, then we might be able to see us trying to reduce and improve that trade deficit that we've got. Now again, with supply side policies, we can see in terms of this diagram why it would shift our productive potential. With the improvement in skill level, which has been missing, maybe with the improvement of infrastructure that would facilitate for manufacturing to improve, and again with the investment in capital goods from what we saw in that video, we can see a boost in long-run aggregate supply to a long-run aggregate supply 1. Allowing for an increase in national outputs. In doing so, what it would mean is that they would get a much more efficient price level, which would be again internationally competitive. We can think, have we got an affordable price? Yes. Have we got the ability to facilitate for demand in terms of quantity? Yes. And have we got the quality? Yes.